So I'm super excited to be here with this esteemed panel of experts. So my name is Wade Holmes, and I'm the Director of Technical Product Management within VMware's Cloud Provider Software Business Unit. So within VMware, we're the business unit that actually creates software and solutions that are targeted to our cloud providers that are part of the VMware Cloud Provider program. And with me, I have a star-studded panel of VCDXs that are here to answer any of the questions you have about whether it's VMware's approach to cloud, specific products, or even getting more granular into nitty-gritty details. This is really a session for you guys, and as the title suggests, Ask the Cloud Expert, to be able to ask some of the questions that may have been burning in your mind as you've seen things in the show or things you've experienced with VMware and VMware's approach to cloud. So I'll let each of the panelists introduce themselves. So first, we'll start with Martin.
Yeah, thanks, Wade. So my name is Martin Hoskins. I'm based in the UK. I'm a principal architect at VMware. I'm part of the cloud practice, which is a team which is 100% aligned to our cloud providers, our strategic cloud providers, offering obviously clouds to thousands, tens of thousands of end consumers. I'm double VCDX, as you can see, AWS certified. I've also got a new storage book out. Well, it's actually not that new anymore. It's over a year old. Just translated into simplified Mandarin or Chinese, if you're able to read that. I couldn't, but it's nice anyway. Thank you.
All right, great. And Ray?
Yeah, hi everyone. So I actually work in the same team as Martin. I'm a principal architect as well. I've been at VMware for about 7.5 years, and my primary focus is end user computing, but for cloud providers. So if you've got questions around things like Workspace ONE and even things like Horizon 7 on VMC, that's really my focus area, as well as things like desktop as a service and where we're heading with that. I don't know what other stats I put up there. I'm also a VCDX. In fact, we're all VCDXs up on stage here. And obviously I focus on data center technologies as well as EUC.
All right, great. Thank you, Ray. And Harold?
Yes, I'm Harold Simon. I'm in the same team as the of my colleagues. I'm a staff cloud solutions architect. I've been with VMware for about 5 years, September. And I started focusing on private cloud with some integrations with public clouds. And then I've been working on this team for the last 3 years, focused on our solutions and service providers using our VCPP licensing program. I'm a double VCDX as well, and I'm based out of Atlanta, Georgia.
All right, awesome. So we have a good range of expertise in different areas. Everyone here is a VCDX. Even I'm a VCDX. But once I got into management, I became unqualified to be deemed an expert and sit here, so now I'm moderating. But, so, as I mentioned, we definitely start to think about some questions that you may have in different areas. So first, let me get a poll of the audience. So how many people here are enterprise customers? And then how many people are cloud providers? Any providers here? Okay, about half and half. And our partners, resellers? Okay, cool. So about almost a third of each of those categories in the audience, so we should get a pretty diverse set of questions. So probably want to start off in asking a general question. So during the keynote, Pat announced that VMware wants to be known as the digital foundation company. Obviously, we have our roots in virtualization. We've been known as a virtualization company and have pretty much created a virtualization industry. And now we're transitioning in this digital foundation, being a digital foundation company, and bringing enterprises on their journey to through digital transformation. So to the panelists here, and based on the projects and the areas you're working in, what does that mean to you, and how do you see VMware releasing products and solutions that enables the us becoming a digital foundation company?
I'll go first if you like. Sure. So one of the conversations I've been in recently with one of my cloud providers that I focus on is that hybrid cloud journey. Now, this cloud provider, like I mentioned, the name is VirtuStream. They're on the Solutions Exchange. And they're primarily known for SAP and technologies like that, and obviously they have a healthcare option as well. But one of their strong points, and this is reflected with a large number of, 4,200 cloud providers in the network. And they're finding enterprises coming to them with questions like, okay, how do I move my applications into the cloud without having to refactor these applications? Because that's a hard challenge, and some of them can do that, but it's for a large number of enterprises, that's a hard problem to solve. So through that partnership that we have with folks like VirtuStream, but other providers as well, they're able to provide that hybrid approach. So products like HCX, for example, the hybrid cloud extension, having that hybridity into areas like VMC, which is VMC on AWS, which you've probably heard a lot about already this week. So that's why I see most of the conversation talking points, and you've seen already this week RDS on premises on vSphere, and I think that's gained a lot of interest. So these are the sort of areas we as cloud architects keep in our armory or toolkit when we're having those conversations with customers.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And when I first started coming to VMware, 14 years or so ago, I think what my first one was, VMware was about vSphere. We had basically one product, ESXi, and we then produced a management product, vCenter. I couldn't even tell you today, and I work for VMware and have done for about 5 years, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head how many VMware products we have now. How many transformation products, how many platform-based products, obviously our new SaaS-based products, VMware Cloud and AWS, and all the spin-off products that we're going to have to that, and all the services that we're delivering as well from a SaaS perspective. I think there's around 10 or 12 at the moment, and there's going to be more and more launched over the next year or so. So all of these come together. VMware no longer is just the hypervisor company, which is what, of course, we built our reputation on. We are now the digital transformation company where we want to take our customers and our partners on that journey from just being a bare metal hypervisor, being a vSphere shop, into a world where they're able to leverage multiple clouds, workload mobility, moving things around like HCX, being able to move things freely, move workloads into environments where they can leverage RDS, Redshift, S3, and create a digital transformation where applications can effectively leverage the best of all worlds, whether you're running partially in AWS, partially on vSphere, and obviously going forward as well, other public cloud platforms as well. But it really is that transformation, and VMware is on the journey, as most tech companies are. It's always a journey, it's a constant transformation, and VMware is on that journey as well, and obviously we're still part way through that journey. I think Pat is calling this Act 3, isn't he, or something, something like that. So we're currently in Act 3. VMware's 20 years old this year, and we've all had our free t-shirts with 20 years on them, and we've seen those logos around everywhere. But over the next 5-10 years, it's going to be so interesting to see where VMware goes and how it matures into this multi-cloud, multi-application, almost hypervisor agnostic environment.
And just to follow on to what he's saying, like with the proliferation of so many technologies and the expansion of our role in the industry, a lot of service providers and their customers are trying to figure out how they can make that path forward. And so we're trying to have that platform that service providers can come in and be that trusted advisor for their customers, whether they're using our products or they need to integrate with other solutions like public cloud solutions or doing containers as a service and those types of things, being able to go with them on that journey and provide a platform for them to seamlessly add in customers and manage all their customers' needs as they continue to move along on their journey to the cloud.
So I think those are all really excellent points, and this whole digital foundation concept makes me think back to earlier in my career with virtualization, when early on you had storage, network, compute, and everyone was consuming storage, network, compute. And then VMware came along and provided a hypervisor that converged all these capabilities and made it easier to consume storage, easier to consume network, easier to consume compute through the concept of a virtual machine. And really that became that foundation for the data center. And I see that as an analogy to the same thing that VMware is trying to do for cloud. We have now all these disparate multi-cloud. We have your on-premises environment. You have the ability to go to VMware Cloud and AWS, the native hyperscaler clouds. So this is Amazon, Azure, Google Cloud. And VMware is attempting to be able to become that digital foundation and bridge across all those technologies that consumers can easily consume this the same way that they were easily consume network compute and storage within their on-premises environment. So to me, it's very exciting. Obviously, there's a huge opportunity, vastly complex, but I think we're in a good position to do so. So let me poll the audience here. How many people think they see VMware as more than just a virtualization company today? All right.
Good.
Awesome. Majority.
That's the right answer.
And I guess I'll start to open up to a few questions here. Does anyone have any questions about VMware going down this journey of digital, becoming a digital foundation company, and how we're trying to create this journey for our enterprises? And the mics are on the side here, so if you have a question, please go up to one of these mics on the side. Here you go.
Yeah, I've got a question. With everything focusing on the cloud and everybody wanting to jump on, I can see some definite advantages to it, but on the same perspective, I can see some disadvantages. And so my biggest concern is availability 24/7. Because I see some real vulnerability when it comes to performance, when it comes to service availability, because everyone's being funneled through the web, basically. And I realize, you can build multi-ISP connections to your your facility and all of this. But when it really comes down to it, there are, at least it seems to me, a lot of potential bottlenecks, because sometimes outages occur in a wide range of a vast area, if you will. And so you can be down for, a potentially significant amount of time, depending on your business. It could be devastating. I mean, we're healthcare, for example. So we got patients 24/7. So that's my biggest concern. So I'd like to hear your perspective on how we can eliminate the risk of that outage. And I know you don't have you're not going to have all the answers for that, but I want to get your perspective on it. And I don't know if UK is any different than the US, but
well, healthcare is, yeah.
I see the vulnerability there. Yeah, healthcare is the same, but as far as the services and stuff.
Yeah, no.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. And no, it's absolutely a challenge, and maintaining availability is always going to be a challenge. And many of these very large mega clouds, the Azures, the AWSs, actually, when you read the T&E, the terms, the conditions, it's not great. The levels of availability they guarantee are not great. But we truly sort of at VMware think that the hybrid solution is the way forward for most businesses. So you've got the concept of some edge computing, maybe some hybrid computing, on-premise, in those hospitals, in those clinics, providing the critical information that's required so that equipment can operate safely and in the most optimal way. For example, if you've got some sort of machine that resuscitates people, do you really want that machine to be talking to Azure in order to make a decision about how much voltage to put into someone to resuscitate them? Yeah, you don't really want, you want that decision to be made locally, either in local compute or locally on that machine. And likewise, with a car that's traveling 80 miles an hour down the road, do you want it to have to talk to Amazon in order to decide whether or not to stop when someone walks out in front of you? Of course you don't. That level of compute has to happen at the local level. And certainly from a critical application perspective or a critical data requirement perspective, we fully expect that to be split across the application from a hybrid perspective. So some parts of that information and data may be living in cloud, some will be living it locally within the equipment or within some sort of edge compute device. So every application is different and every use case is different. However, I agree, and if we look at how the big hyperclouds were positioning themselves a few years ago, everything goes to cloud. Every application goes to cloud. Now they've changed. Yeah, we've got things like Azure Stack. We've got obviously our own edge, our Project Dimension, our own edge, which really, to some extent, extends VMC to on-premise, but it also goes beyond that. It's not specifically linked with VMC. You can have a lot of the advantages of VMC, fully managed hypervisors, CI/CD lifecycle of hosts, on-premise, running that compute at various different scales. So I think to summarize, the answer to that question is it'll depend on the applications, but I do not expect in any time soon for the vast majority of businesses to go completely cloud. I don't know whether...
Yeah, I've got just something to add to that, and you kind of touched on it, is look at what the public cloud offers us in terms of all the services and these new ways of developing apps. You know, we don't have Netflix and Ubers of the world without it. But what's happening now, and I think we're still early on, is we're now seeing that come to the data center on premises. You know, we've just mentioned RDS, but there's AWS Greengrass or whatever it is. That some of those services, the abilities for the edge, are now coming back the other way. And then we have products like HCX, and you touched on this, Martin, having applications that, sometimes it's suited, it has to be local, it's business critical. But other times, the cloud's an ideal place, and with hybrid cloud extension, we have a layer 2 extension, but maybe to a cloud provider or to VMC on AWS or whatever, whatever you're using. You can now have applications split across. When I think back to the good old days when I was in professional services, mainly my focus was end user computing. So these are desktops. If they're down, no one can work. They can't access any of the applications. So back then it was around DR or active. But I think it's become more complex than that. It's more multifaceted now.
And sorry, just one other point. The amount of data being generated as well on, within the factory, within the hospital, within the car that's been driven is horrific. These autonomous cars are generating maybe 50 terabytes of data per day. It's not realistic to upload that at the end of each day to your white cloud services. You have to be able to provide some level of data management locally. Otherwise, the costs, the data retention cost or whatever's required becomes a cost barrier.
And it's also important to look at some of the advantages that it brings that weren't there before, like Ray mentioned DR, and the economies of scale that some of these service providers work with, especially if you look like AWS, that now that you have something like VMC, for a lot of customers and our partners, it makes DR use cases a lot more cost effective and something that they can spin up. Some of them are looking at, nothing to something in minutes, or having a steady state where they have resources there in the cloud available for failover. So it's something that instead of them having to stand up their own data center, they can take advantage of the cloud services that are available today with the existing technologies that they're familiar with, and be able to recover in the event of a disaster, and then easily bring those things back on premises when needed with solutions like HCX as well.
Yeah, it goes to show it's not one size fits all. You're talking about healthcare in particular there, but manufacturing, a completely different sector. Maybe they have heavy requirements for 3D applications and GPU workloads. Now, I know for a fact that a lot of manufacturing organizations will have very seasonal peak workloads, and then maybe bring contractors in or designers. Maybe that's where the cloud excels, because they can pay for what they use without investing all this capital in hardware, and I can speak from experience, and use that power, obviously, whether it's Azure or AWS, obviously they all offer GPU workloads, and to be able to leverage that capacity when it's needed, not have this huge investment, which you then have to have a big CapEx investment from the beginning.
Yeah. No, I think that is a key point that all of you mentioned here. Is it's not one size fits all. As mentioned, there are different applications with different requirements, and I think when some people think of cloud, they may just think of the native AWS model where they have to completely refactor applications and it's across big availability zones. But from a VMware perspective, our cloud approach, and when we say VMware Cloud, we give flexibility and choice in that we have VMware Cloud on AWS, which is our SDDC stack with the availability across Amazon zones. But we also have our 4,500 VMware Cloud provider partners, who are cloud providers that have their own unique value proposition and their own unique capabilities and different SLAs, where some of them may be appropriate to be able to manage legacy applications more so, or fit your application and needs. And then part of VMware Cloud also is our cloud services that we're enabling to be able to manage services across both VMware environments and the native hyperscalers. So that's part of our whole vision and that, as I mentioned, that whole digital foundation, and being able to try and provide the different capabilities depending on the needs of our customers. So as we talk about, I talked about a few things, I mentioned a few things there, VMware Cloud and AWS, the concept of VMware Cloud, our VMware Cloud provider programs, all options that enterprises can use. You guys want to talk about how you see VMware Cloud and AWS and these different potential paths that enterprises can consume, how they're transforming different enterprises' operational model, how they're transforming the way they consume technology.
Yeah, there's no doubt that AWS or VMware Cloud on AWS just opens up a whole new range of possibilities. The hybrid applications, one of the key ones, DR, being able to leverage a AWS region for your DR capabilities, spinning up on-demand hosts to recover workloads, keeping that minimal footprint at all times, and then spinning up and then failing workloads over, as required. It's certainly opening up a whole range of possibilities. Application usages where you've got zero egress traffic costs between native AWS and VMware Cloud and AWS, that seems to be very popular, and a lot of people are talking about that as well. Today, if you're running applications and they're leveraging and pulling data from AWS, maybe S3 or another service, and you're pulling all that data out constantly, you can have very significant Amazon egress traffic charges. Put those applications into VMC, and suddenly that's across an interconnect, a switch, if you like, within their data centers, and there's zero cost associated with that, zero latency or close to zero latency for most services, and high bandwidth. So it really opens up lots and lots of possibilities. And I get asked quite a lot, actually, what are the key use cases? And there isn't one. Every customer you talk to, or every partner you talk to, has their own use cases and why they're considering VMware Cloud and AWS as a good fit, either today or maybe next year or the following year, as they're refreshing their hardware or whatever their life cycle is. But there doesn't seem to be a single use case that stands out beyond others why people are looking at this technology. But there are certainly some really interesting concepts there that we are looking about how we leverage other partners to develop. Elastic DRS being one, the ability to add and remove hosts on demand. That's a vSphere feature. Enterprises and partners can leverage that feature. It's not exclusive to VMware Cloud and AWS. So it's quite interesting and going forward how other partners are going to look at these technologies as well and say, I want to be able to do that. How can I deliver the same sort of elasticity, the same sort of on-demand resources as we do in VMware Cloud and AWS? How can I do that in my data center?
And it also allows partners as well to take on different operating models, like move to more of an asset-light model. Letting them spin up instances or provide services to their customers that are outside of their typical regions. That global footprint of VMware Cloud and AWS also opens up several more options for partners to use as well.
Yeah, just one example, a recent example is, and I'm going to EUC again, but it is desktops. Horizon has a feature called Cloud Pod Architecture, but when that was released, there was no cloud part of it. This was a case of you've got your Horizon instance on premises, and you can have another Horizon instance, say in another data center, maybe another geographic location, and federate the two so that they're linked together. Before, they were always separate. But now that cloud pod architecture makes complete sense because that secondary pod can be on VMC, on AWS. That can be Horizon on VMC. And now, if you think of a total disaster situation, their primary data center's out, they've got this secondary pod on VMC, and as you just said, Martin, elastic DRS, and you can now scale and come back the other way. So there's one use case.
And a really good use case is Handson Labs here. 65% of the resources for Handson Labs in VMworld are bursting into VMware Cloud and AWS. Obviously, Handson Labs is something that's available throughout the year, but it's peak workloads doing VMware Cloud and AWS, hundreds, thousands of people going down there running those labs. That is bursting into VMware Cloud and AWS today. Sorry. Can you use the mic because we're being recorded?
Thank you. Or over here.
There's one on either side.
On the sides. Yeah. Oh, this way. Sorry.
While he's walking to the mic, just a quick question. So for hybrid cloud at VMC, Paul Morrissey was attaching. So some of our customers assume they need to have a vSAN private infrastructure to leverage VMC. So we've been educating that availability of HLM and HCX, that's not quite true. What implementation or guidance would you give for these customers that have vSphere storage and private cloud that want to take advantage of VMC in their environments?
Yes, I'm not sure you had the first part of the question.
So the question, our customers assume they have to have vSAN-based private infrastructure to leverage VMC.
Yeah.
Obviously, a lot of our customers have vSphere storage.
Yeah.
And we're just looking for implementation and guidance on how these customers leverage HCX or HLM to move to that model.
So that's certainly true that VMware Cloud and AWS is based on vSAN storage. There will be, we've announced this week actually that there is a new host type that's available with EBS storage, and I'll come back to that in a moment. But there will be other storage types available in VMware Cloud and AWS going forward, and it depends on what type of storage you want to leverage. As I said, we've announced this week a new host type that leverages EBS storage. We're still using the vSAN abstraction layer, but we're presenting EBS storage, which is Amazon's elastic block storage, to those hosts and creating the vSAN construct over the top of that. That's really interesting for a couple of reasons. First of all, it gives us flexibility from the amount of storage that we present to a host. There is a minimum amount and a maximum amount today, but I think it's 15 to 35 terabytes available per host today. But that allows you to scale storage linearly independent of the compute. And one of the challenges, or one of the benefits, or one of the challenges of HCI is that you traditionally have to scale compute and storage linearly in order to maximize the investment. By leveraging the EBS storage, it simplifies the architecture. So you can run just 3 nodes of compute and maybe have 100 terabytes of storage available to you. So it gives you, it separates the dependency between those two. It's also interesting that for the first time ever, vSAN is being used for storage that is not inside the host. So storage that exists outside the host, presented as a DAS device effectively, but it doesn't live inside that host. It's been presented to AWS's proprietary EBS technology. But think about how it can be used going forward. vSAN, again, is still a very, it's a very well-established product already, but it's still a growing product, and more and more new features are being implemented on a several times a year, every 3 months almost. So being able to abstract vSAN from the actual physical storage is really where they're going with this product, and that's really interesting because whether you're running Hitachi storage, whether you're running NetApp storage or EMC storage, having a single abstraction layer, a common entry point for all storage, becomes really interesting. And that's really where they're going with that product.
Just to add to that, because you mentioned HCX as well, and on premises, if they've got an older version of vSphere, they don't have vSAN, they've just got their VMs and they want to leverage that hybridity to the cloud, that's what HCX does. Is it backwards compatible to 5.0 on
5.1?
Yeah.
5.1 for cold migration and 5.5 for live migration.
Okay, yeah, so if you can go, if they've got 5, for example, on premises, obviously we're running the latest version in VMC, you can do that. They don't need vSAN. There's some requirements, but it's very minimal.
And I think it's worth pointing out as well, a lot of the VMware marketing around HCX, or the new name for HCX is NSX Hybrid Connect, but I know it's not like VMware to rename a product, but they have in this case. So Hybrid Connect, or HCX, a lot of the marketing around that is associated with VMware Cloud and AWS. But it is a standalone tool, and I want to make sure everyone understands that. And I keep saying this continuously because our marketing doesn't really reflect that. It's a standalone tool that allows migration from global migration of thousands of workloads in a very simplified and ordered manner with a predefined recovery order and migration order. It's a really, really interesting tool that I would encourage everyone to look at when they're required to migrate workloads around from either within the data center or across multiple data centers or across multiple regions, and even global as well.
Yeah, I've got cloud providers using it purely for migrating from, I'll say legacy, pretty loosely termed, to the next gen architecture. Yeah. They just need to migrate those workloads, and it's obviously far more flexible, different architectures.
Exactly. I was talking to a customer just a couple of weeks ago who had hundreds of SAP HANA workloads running on vSphere 5.5. They couldn't upgrade the underlying infrastructure, the vSphere version, because their hardware wasn't supported with 6.5. So they had to build a new greenfield 6.5 environment and migrate using HCX from one side of their data center, one set of cages, to another set of cages. Of course, you're not leveraging the SD-WAN capabilities of HCX when you do that, but you're leveraging that abstraction layer that allows you to move from 5.5 to 6.5 without powering off those VMs. Live vMotion between those two different versions of vSphere. So it's really, really interesting from a workload mobility perspective. We're just entering a new age of capabilities. Sorry, Harold.
No, I'm good. You guys said everything.
Still got that question over there.
Sorry.
So sorry, go ahead, since we had a question.
Yeah, you mentioned your labs are bursting into the public cloud. Can you just explain cloud bursting at a really high level and how that's controlled? And, maybe using that.
Yeah. So obviously, cloud bursting means different things actually, depending on the context you're using. Sometimes it's an application that bursts and grows, depending on the amount of workload requiring. What we're talking about here is leveraging vSphere hosts in VMware Cloud and AWS and the vCenters that are associated with those, and publishing our content, our hands-on lab content into that. It is as simple as that. So obviously in multiple regions within the world, VMware have data centers that we run our hands-on labs. It's actually called One Cloud internally. It's one of the biggest vCloud Director, it is actually the biggest vCloud Director platform existing in the world. I forget the exact numbers, I don't want to make things up, but it's absolutely vast. I think there's something like 300,000 virtual machines get built and destroyed every single day. We normally have ample capacity to run that environment, but at VMworld, of course, when there's maybe 10, 20 times more people running hands-on labs, because there's new hands-on labs and new experiences, that we just require additional resources. In the past, they've wheeled in vast amounts of Cisco UCS hardware, and if in the past you've seen the back tour of hands-on labs, you will have walked past those racks of servers, hundreds of Cisco UCS servers. Now we're bursting into the cloud instead to do that.
Yeah. So I think the concept of cloud bursting, it's something that first heard talked about maybe 8 years ago now, 10 years ago, and it's meant different things to different people, but it's definitely something that is now enabled through, I mentioned utilizing geographic resources through either VMware Cloud and AWS or additional cloud providers. So how many people here actually utilize some form of cloud bursting, whether it's for regional resources or today, or regional resources, or based on season? One, two. And I guess, how many people think cloud bursting is something that is actual capability that is needed in their environment, or they would like to see this capability in their environment? So I'd like to know, for those who said they would like to see this or need this, but didn't raise their hand and say they're doing it today, what are the technology barriers today that stops you from being able to burst into the cloud? Or anyone who...
We got one over here.
So basically, we have all the application database, everything else resides on-prem. So for example, Labor Day weekend or Black Friday, when that time comes, we need to make sure we have extra hardware just in case we need to spin up more VMs. But if we put it on the cloud, there's going to be latency for communicating to the database, so we would have to replicate the database out there. So it's more complex than just standing up more VMs out there. We got to make sure we don't hurt more the performance than actually help it just by standing up more VMs.
Well, that's a good example actually of an app I was talking about earlier with HCX and having part of some of the workloads on premises and others in the cloud. Obviously, I don't know the intricacies of that application, but is that something you would consider if you could move that database into the cloud, but maybe have some of the other servers on premises, or would this be you'd have to shift the whole thing?
Well, in the architecture, whatever performs best, that's usually what drives the decision.
And it does depend on the application, of course.
Correct. So passive performance, whatever can do the most transactions per second, that's usually where the decision goes. As long as it's reliable as well. But.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, should we have the...
You had a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I think in
the software-defined data center is just a different plane of management for the same stuff, right? Do you guys see kind of the evolution of that coming into the way that folks start managing on-prem infrastructure as well?
Yeah, so the concept of SDDC and what we're doing coming into the on-prem side.
Well, I think you can almost say that it sort of started there, right, with VCF, that we started automating that process and deploying it so you have that whole stack on premises. And definitely one of the things that excites me about VMware Cloud AWS is that we definitely have these groups working a lot closer together, even more so than they were before. And those features that they come up with and ideas they come up with should end up, some of those someday benefiting customers in their environments.
That's a really good point, though. Yeah. VMware Cloud Foundation, we haven't really talked about that in depth, but that is exactly what you're asking about there, the SDDC. With the automated deployment, and I remember looking at that when we first developed it. I was blown away. You can run.
Absolutely, the concept of VCF is simplification. We're all vSphere, a lot of experience in vSphere in this room. Actually integrating products to work together was traditionally a challenge. And to be fair to VMware, we've got a lot better at that over the last few years. But VCF takes it to another level where you basically have one bundle that you deploy, one bundle that you update, full lifecycle management available from a single update patch, if you like. And that can be quite a large patch, but it's a single patch. It manages the update, the cycle for that. And again, it gives you some of the elasticity features of adding and removing hosts to some extent as you have it. So we're going to absolutely see further growth in VCF. We're also going to see VCF leveraged in different ways. I talked about product dimension earlier on. Of course, it's leveraged there. It's been leveraged by the likes of our key cloud providers, IBM, Rackspace, CenturyLink, etc., are leveraging it. And we're seeing more and more customers leveraging it as well. I was talking to a customer who was using it on battleships. Standardization is key on that type of infrastructure. You've got portside data center and starboard data center running VCF on independent power supplies, with vSAN stretched between the two, fully autonomous, fully available on both sides of these huge aircraft carriers.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So VCF standardizes that and simplifies it. And that's really what VCF does today. More and more features will come into VCF as we go forward, particularly adding additional products like vRealize and things like that on top of that through vRealize Software Lifecycle Manager, the connection with that.
That's exciting. I'll check that out for sure.
Yeah, thank you.
I do have another question.
Sure, please go ahead.
People are so excited about moving their workloads into the cloud, but getting there is also, obviously very difficult and technically challenging. So once that big project is done, you've migrated this big workload out to the cloud and give everybody a high fives all around, right? And then you get the bill. And then, so tell us a story of when, it's basically coming back from the cloud.
Yeah.
Coming back. Tell me that story.
So it's certainly harder to come back than to go. All of the key cloud providers that we're talking about here, Azure, AWS, obviously Google Cloud as well, they make it very easy and they provide you a nice set of tool sets, vCenter connectors to import those virtual machines from your environment into theirs. But of course, going back is a lot more challenging. And I can assure you that at VMware, within our professional services team, there are lots of projects of moving people back from AWS to on-premise private data centers. There's one key phone manufacturer, or it's actually a much larger company that are currently moving 800,000 virtual machines out of, I better not say the name of one of the key big hyperscale clouds, back on-premise, purely due to cost.
And I've got a question for you then. Are they looking at HCX?
So how do you leverage HCX to do that? If you're moving from
the cloud,
yeah. So the VMC.
So we come on to VMC, of course, but one of the, and there's a few advantages of VMC, there's a few disadvantages of VMC as well, of course, but one of the advantages is it's pretty fixed cost. You pay per host, per hour that you consume. If you add additional hosts, you pay per hour you consume. You remove them, you pay per hour you consume. But it's pretty predictable and fixed. If you look at the cost of other cloud services, they're less predictable. Of course, all of them have their own billing mechanisms and their own ways of keeping you tied to that infrastructure. But absolutely, more and more people are looking to move, from the likes of EC2 or Azure back into private data centers. And to be perfectly honest, VMware doesn't have a good story today on doing that. We did acquire a company a few months ago, Cloud Velox. Where we're going to go with that, I don't think any of us on the stage will know. But
I mean, the vision is to integrate that technology into HCX.
Yeah. So to give you the tools to bring things back on premise. I don't think anytime soon we're going to see this concept of moving back and forth between VMware and EC2 bouncing back and forth based on cost metrics. I don't think we're going to see that anytime soon. But certainly, migrating back to an on-premise, or a VMware Cloud where you know where it costs each time you use it. Because most cloud migrations are oversized, of course. You migrate to the largest instance that you think you can afford, whether you're using it or not, and that gets expensive. So I don't know whether you guys have got something to add to that. Sorry.
No, I think you've covered it.
Yeah,
the reason I mentioned HCX is obviously today with HCX, obviously we've got VMC on AWS. But things like a layer 2 extension now enables, vMotion, so that's part of that journey you're talking about, but we're probably not completely there yet.
But it's a challenge, and and more people are facing that challenge, and I think we're seeing that. I see it certainly on a weekly basis when you talk to people and talk to businesses. We're seeing it purely based on out of control costs, particularly with the whole shadow IT thing. There's a pharmaceutical company in the UK that I've worked with quite a lot. And they have no control of cloud expenditure, none whatsoever, because they just don't know where.
So,
a couple more questions.
I have a question. Sorry, go ahead.
Can you talk a little bit about RDS on vSphere? What did that implementation look like? Was the vSAN requirement a business or technical decision?
So this comes back to project dimension, effectively, and the ability to run vSphere on-premise that simulates what we've done in VMware Cloud and AWS. So in VMware Cloud and AWS, we have the concept, of course, of continuous integration, continuous development. We patch almost continuously. Some aspects might be patched on a daily basis. Let's take the vCenter client, for example, the web client, H5 web client. That is a constant development, an improvement, bug fixing, etc. at the moment. Those fixes are done on almost a daily basis in VMware Cloud and AWS. Other fixes are rolled up every 3 months as we do our patching cycles. That same concept has been moved to the edge or to on-premise data centers. So a fully managed vSphere host running on-premise in a complete, today we're working with Lenovo and Dell, but other manufacturers will come into that as well. It's going to be a RDS on vSphere is going to be controlled in those types of environments. It's not a free-for-all, if you like. It's a controlled environment that will be able to leverage those same capabilities and that you can have from a managed perspective on those edge infrastructure. Does that answer your question?
I mean, is it going to be just black box, like a black hole in that sense, like an Azure stack?
So it's basically, I think the minimum number of nodes will be 2. They're small, light, zero moving parts types of hosts. They run on-premise with minimal connections, minimal knowledge need to deploy them. You literally just plug them in. It includes VeloCloud technology as well as the lifecycle management technology. You run those on hosts. The smallest implementations, we're talking between 12 and 20 VMs. Again, all of this information could change as we move forward, of course, but they're looking at multiple different scale models. So maybe a 4-node implementation, a 16-node implementation as a large, if you like, on-premise. So it's a fully managed, I don't want to say VMware Cloud and AWS model, because that is slightly different again, but it's leveraging much of the technology that we've developed for VMware Cloud and AWS into the on-premise edge type model.
And the details may not be worked out. Is it, from a pricing perspective, that?
Oh, nowhere near worked out. Nowhere near.
I just want to talk about the model. Is it be consumption pricing? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. But the pricing model hasn't been worked out. There were some sessions by Kit Coleman this week, which you will be able to watch the recordings of. He drills into that, and there may be multiple based consumption models, but most likely will be a consumption. But you may be able to pre-purchase as capex as well and burn down. Very, very similar to VMware. It could be the same billing mechanism as we use for VMware Cloud and AWS.
Sure. think, not sure who is next. Go ahead.
So while we talk about the new products and really releases being on like a 3-month cadence, right? Everybody going agile and adding features, adding fixes. How do you guys see customers staying relevant with the open bugs against them? Since VMware doesn't publish anything, so take NSX for example, right? 641 came out, and then that day, that was it. That was release notes. The next day, the new bugs, there's no way to find it unless you run into it. So how are you guys seeing that transition without RDS?
Yeah.
How can customers stay relevant with the open bugs so we can avoid them, so we can, with uptime, reboot before then, or like the old NSX password bug, go and reset it, that kind of stuff.
So, question for you: what is your typical your update cycle? Like how far out or how close do you need to be to release cycles of a new product, typically?
So we do about a 3-month burn-in on our code lines. We typically only update. It used to be there was kind of a cadence to it, but now with the vendors that we have and the overall bugs that we run into, because I feel like the higher cadence of features being added, we run into a whole lot more bugs, right? So now we upgrade only when we're required to because we have a bug, and that's turning into about every month.
Wow. Okay.
And that's not just VMware, that's the full stack, right? So we are trying to become proactive so that we can see the bug before we run into it in the best way possible, right? We're not going to see all of them. But as a customer, we have no insight to those.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
So there's a few different approaches. Of course, as bugs are discovered with products, we tend to see KB articles being released. GSS can also advise you on upgrade paths as well.
I have to run into that bug, or I have to have the issue to either look through the logs, to Google search to find that specific KB, or I have to open a case with GSS for them to look at my logs and tell me if that
But
bug.
you can proactively open the case with GSS and say that I am going to be doing this upgrade from this version of NSX to this version of NSX.
Yeah, I'm talking just regular, not even updates, just regular running.
Yeah.
Right? Today's Wednesday. There's at least one bug open today against the full stack. vSphere, vCenter, NSX, all the SEC, where it's going, right? So I need to know about that bug. And of course, they're not all going to be published that same day, right? But I need to know so I can prevent it. So I have, my new data center has been active for 7 months and I have 9 outages, all VMware.
Yeah, that's not. I agree. That's not a good place to be in. But what I would urge you to do is to be proactive about patching and work with GSS in order to keep them informed of the patch cycle. GSS have access to all bugs that, as I identified them. Obviously, we have an internal knowledge base as well as an external knowledge base. If you raise a ticket or raise a call or SR with GSS and say, this is what I'm planning on doing on these dates, can you please review this and let me know what issues I should expect to see, if any? They'll be able to do that for you. GSS are there for proactive support as well as reactive support.
Right, and actually that's upgrades, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm opening a ticket every day to say, okay, is there a new NSX bug?
You're talking about day-to-day operations.
Monitoring the KB articles.
NSX, NSX is my central point for my networking now, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm a 95% virtualized environment. So if NSX has a problem, all my customers have a problem.
Yeah.
Right? It's not a single point anymore.
And I think we're trying to solve that, am I right to say, with VMware Cloud Foundation and the way that's patched and updated, but obviously just specific on products like NSX, it's a challenge. I don't know the...
And Skyline is a potential something you could look at. Skyline is actually a paid-for service, so I don't, that's another issue.
And it does not include bugs.
It does not include bugs today.
It's technically not on the roadmap to have bug notification against your code line that you're running. I talked to the Skyline team.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, absolutely. But the aim for Skyline is to address these types of problems and to simplify that patch management. So it identifies and looks at your environment and looks at the potential issues you could have in your environment and notifies of those issues. vSAN as well is building in that capability natively within the product and within vCenter to notify you based on these controllers, based on this firmware version. We think you might have a problem. Please refer to this KB article. So we're certainly making improvements to that. Have we solved the problem? No. Has any vendor solved the problem? Has Microsoft solved the problem?
That was my next question to
Yeah,
you
you know,
It's a challenge.
You know, it's software lifecycle, and it's whether it's the platform that we're talking about now, whether it's the application, SAP, Oracle, or something you've written in-house. Lifecycle management is, at all levels is always a challenge, and that's why we have jobs.
Right, and I agree with that.
Yeah.
But Skyline will, at some point, it'll be a great product.
Yeah, it's very early.
It'll have more features to it, right? RDS
Yeah.
will be great for that because they'll have a lot of that already built into it. But how would you guys design right now in order to get around these issues? What would you guys be doing to be proactive to make sure that you don't have any more outages?
So the best guidance is to look at things like VMware Validated Designs, Cloud Foundation, and absolutely completely standardize the environment. In some respects, they reduce flexibility then, of course, within that environment. But they standardize that environment to ensure that you have the best interoperability experience. Because VMware Validated Designs, for example, how much testing goes into those? It's months.
Yeah, months of testing.
Months of testing
down
and
to the
interoperability
granular
testing.
level.
We're FlexPod, so we already are a DVD.
Yeah.
And we actually have PS even come in and do a health check.
Yeah, but as I said, we're always going to find these bugs. No one's really solved that problem. All we can do is be as proactive as possible and minimizing the impact when they do occur.
My question is how would you guys, knowing these problems that you've kind of gone through the normal steps, you made sure you're doing standardized, your configs are all the same. How would you guys design it to prevent it going forward?
I think the answer, which correct me if I'm wrong, what you're saying is Cloud Foundation, that type of approach where it's just, or the VVDs, but it's standardized. I know you've got the FlexPod today, but beyond that, maybe we don't have 100% of that answer.
Yeah, but all you can do as the person responsible for that is to take steps to minimize the risk and minimize the impact. Are you ever going to get rid of that risk and impact altogether? I very much doubt it. Certainly not in our lifetime. Maybe AI at some point is able to write code that is absolutely perfect and flawless. But
I'll save that one for my kids when they're older.
but today where we are, code isn't perfect. And whether you're running, how often does PowerPoint crash when you're in the middle of a presentation, on a WebEx, almost on a weekly basis, whether Windows or Mac, we don't live in that perfect world. So as the administrator or the person responsible, your role is to minimize the risk as much as possible. And 9 outages, what did you say, 7 outages or 9 outages in a matter of months. That's pretty bad. And from a design perspective, I would be going, looking at FlexPod and say, what's the problem here? You should be validating these bugs. I used to work with, and so did Ray actually, with VC, and we had the whole concept of this fully validated implementation that was thoroughly tested. Did people ever find bugs? Of course they did. But the aim of that testing and that validation was to just minimize them and minimize the risk as much as possible. I know we haven't really answered your question, but I think that's the best we can do for
That's a VCDX answer, is risk mitigation.
Yeah. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, gentlemen.
So I work for a service provider, and more customers want self-service capabilities to do. They want to manage their own backups, even though we're hosting all their stuff or do their own DR. So currently, we're using vCloud Director, and it's working great, and everybody loves it. When you go to a hybrid situation, what are you going to use? So it doesn't have, so you don't have to go to portal A to portal B to portal C, because they don't want to be. They'll get confused. It'll be messy. So what's the VCD for the hybrid cloud going to look like, or is there going to be something like that?
So there is. I'm not sure we're allowed to talk openly about the plan for linking vSphere to vCloud Director. I don't think we're allowed to. So okay, so
we can talk
conceptually, but I don't think the actual engineering work is committed to begin yet. So I don't. I can't say specifically how we're doing it, but I absolutely agree. vCloud Director has come a huge way in the last 2 years. You've seen this. 9.5, we just released this, or announced this week.
What version are you on?
Not the latest.
9.1.
9.0.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in the last 2 years, we've come, a phenomenal amount of distance with a new user interface, and the extensibility within that interface, the concept of multi-site, the NSX integration. We've made huge strides forward. But there is that gap. If I'm an end consumer and I have a small vSphere environment on my premises, and I'm also consuming vCloud Director resources from a cloud provider, how do I get a single pane of glass? Today, we don't have an answer for that. We have the migration answer. We can help you move those workloads into that vCloud Director environment, no problem at all. But how do I do day 2 operations, rebooting, restarting, migration within my vCenter? We don't have an answer to that, but we are building one. Yeah, and it's going
to go towards in Amazon as well. So you know.
No, so what we're talking about today is vSphere, vCenter, being able to leverage resources and view resources in vCloud Director.
Is there going to be anything? So now we're going to run, you know, vSphere on Amazon. Is that going to be hooked in eventually?
Absolutely, okay. And it's the same technology. Yeah. So the single pane of glass, when you open your vCenter, you have your on-premise data center, your Amazon data center, and vCloud Direct data center. Think about, I can't talk about it, but think about the technologies that we use to do that, and you're getting towards the story. Sorry for being cryptic, but I don't think we've committed the engineering on that yet.
Go ahead. Just a related question. We work with some service providers in Europe and use vCloud Director. I guess one of their key asks is to delegate vCenter to the tenants that they create virtualization environments. It's currently, I believe, a challenge for vCloud Director, and they want to move to vRAID instead. So I'm curious about vision in that area to help customers get to delegated vCenter access.
They want to move to what again?
To delegate vCenter access to...
So fleet management is what we're talking about. We can talk about that, can't we? Yeah. So do you guys want to talk about fleet management?
Not my area.
I feel like I've been doing a lot of the talking. I apologize for that. So vCloud Director's extensibility framework allows us to publish pretty much anything we like, any type of service within vCloud Director. We are working currently on publishing vCenter services to vCloud Director. So if you imagine the use case, the end consumer logs into vCloud Director. They have a number of different services. Those will be org VDC services. Maybe you're presenting HCX, maybe you're also presenting VeloCloud or another service. What if one of those services you were presenting was vCenter? That's what we're calling fleet management. So the end consumer logs into vCloud Director and they can consume resources from vCloud Director, org VDC resources, other SaaS-based services that VMware offer, or a vCenter server. Effectively what you'll do, you'll click on the button, the box that says vCenter, and it'll open the H5 client within the iframe of vCloud Director. What gets very interesting is when you start thinking about networking. What if your consumer wants to be able to leverage networking from their org VDC into vCenter? That's when it gets interesting, and that's the biggest challenge of this. Other than that, it's just a simple extensibility plugin. But leveraging the networking from the org VDCs for that customer into vCenter is where it becomes interesting, and that's what work is currently going on as well in the background. 2019, you'll see that being available as a plugin for vCloud Director. Sorry.
No problem. So, and don't apologize, Martin.
I just felt like I was doing too much of the talking. I apologize for that. So, I'll shut up now.
We talked a lot about VMware Cloud and AWS, and then we started to get some questions around vCloud Director. Obviously, there are a number of paths that enterprises can take to consume cloud resources today. Talk a little bit about your perspective on how cloud providers fit into the VMware Cloud and AWS world, both from a providing resources to customers based on VMware technology, and also potentially leveraging VMware Cloud and AWS and or VMware Cloud services.
Yeah, I don't mind starting this one. So I've had complete polar opposite conversations this week in meetings. So for example, a provider just today, based in Europe, do not want to leverage that because of things like GDPR. So they have customers that they need to know where that data is located, and obviously there's the GDPR as part of that, but there's also certain regions where they don't want the data to be with maybe an American company, for example, where it's hosted. On the other end of the extreme, I've had conversations this week where the smaller service providers want to expand into different regions, and VMC on AWS will give them that option. Obviously, you've seen the regions available, and we've just made some more announcements this week. Maybe they're an East Coast provider and they need some West Coast presence, for example. And that makes it very easy for them to do that. I don't know if is that similar to conversations you guys have been having?
Absolutely, and I've spent the last couple of months traveling around the world talking to our partners about VMware Cloud and AWS, and that regional expansion is one of the key use cases.
Top? Yeah.
I'm not sure it's the top use case, but it's certainly one of the biggest ones.
It's attractive one for
being able to deploy new resources in a new region within a matter of hours, as opposed to months and months, possibly even years.
I think it totally transforms the
whole
services.
the outlay of cash or whatever they have to spin up a data center.
Absolutely.
The one with a lot of service providers that I'm talking to with is DR. I think it also lets them do it a lot faster, a lot more flexibility, and brings down some of the cost point of providing that for customers. So that's one that a lot of that is keen on a lot of service providers' minds that I'm working with today.
All right, awesome. So I think we're just out of time. Obviously, time flies when you're having fun, but I want to thank this esteemed panel of experts, Martin, Harold, Ray, and I also want to thank the audience for all the great questions. I mentioned before, I think VMware's approach to VMware Cloud is providing multiple paths of flexibility as we guide customers through this digital journey and becoming this digital foundation company. So, I hope that I mentioned you see VMware now as more than just a virtualization company and all the hundreds of directions that we're building products and solutions that like I said, none of us can name all of them today. And if you have any more questions, feel free to reach out to any of us and we can engage further. But thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.